Welcome to the Occult Rejects. This episode, I got a very, very special guest, probably more of a guest for me than the listeners, really. Somebody that was very influential in me when I started my practice and getting into occultism. But before we introduce David, we'll introduce the rest of the rejects. And first, Euros up. What is going on? How are you? Thank you very much for making it today. Oh, I think you're muted for some reason. I still can't hear you. All right. No, we'll go over to Robbie Marks. Marks, how are you, sir? What's going on?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thanks. I've been into the occult for years. Started reading into it when I was, around probably 14 or 15. But I do artwork for bands, festivals, different stuff. If you want to check out any of my stuff, my podcast, my artwork, you could check out Linktree at RMARX. And thanks for having me on, Nick.
Of course. Thank you very much, Robbie. I appreciate you making the time. And for maybe new listeners, if they have not heard of Robbie Marks before, please go check out some of the older shows. It's Storytime with Robbie. Lots of information. And I'm very happy to have him on the show. Euros, we'll try one more time. Are you good to go? No, it's still not working. Damn. I am sorry. All right, Jin, sir. How are you?
I'm really nervous. Thank you so much, Nick, for inviting me on this incredible discussion with David. And I'm a huge fan, and I'm trying not to fanboy. Matt knows I was nervous because I texted him before we recorded, as well as you, Nick. So thank you so much, David. I've never had a spirit-based practice particularly. I really started out as most younger millennial boys do in more of a chaos magic sort of like framework. Now I'm a tantric Buddhist, so that's how I'm very familiar with Mike McGee and the Aeon of Mott workings and Frater Achad and stuff that we work on in the Grey Lodge, as well as my show Threshold Saints. So if people are interested in what I do, and also of course Matt Murrah, because he is my brother in the Grey Lodge, but if you're interested, check me out on Threshold Saints on IG and Twitter X at Threshold Saints, or my personal account at Wukong Reborn, and also our Grey Lodge website, which obviously Matt Murrah is our webmaster. So thetruegraylodge.com, TRVE graylodge.com. And we do speculative Kabbalah, speculative Kala Chakra, and speculative Gnosticism every Friday night live, recorded for YouTube. So thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for making it, sir. And for real, everybody go check out that Spaces if you have not. Very, very good stuff. And next, we'll Headless Giant. What is going on, sir?
How you doing, Nick? You can find me at the Headless Giant podcast at gmail.com. If you have any sort of esoteric stories, me and Nick will read them out to you on Thursday, along with our symbolic studies as well on Thursday. So check that out. And also, I've got a show called Alchemy Mondays with Eros, talking about alchemy, doing alchemical experiments. And I've also got the trialogues coming up tomorrow with Ethan Indigo and Ricardo. So check those out. You can, find me on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. We did a great show on the Delphic oracles last night. And check that one out as well. So thank you.
Yeah, that one was a lot of fun, actually. And Matt Moore, what is going on, sir?
Hey, yo. Happy to be here. Thanks again for calling me. Glad and very appreciate that I could meet David IRL, and that was very fun at the Zoe Society event. So Matt Murrah, as Jin was already saying, we have the Spaces. Yesterday's Spaces was really nice. We always then repost them on YouTube on Wednesdays. And there's also my website. That's Kabbalah.com, KAABALAH.com. A lot of cool stuff coming up there as well. So make sure to follow me on my socials. The handle's right here at MattMurrah19. So pretty excited for today.
All right. Thank you very much, man. I appreciate you coming on. And last, if we can get it to work, Eros, let's see if it works now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Great. It's awesome to meet you, David. Thanks for coming. Thanks for inviting me, Nick. You can find me on YouTube at ErosUp, and you can find me on Twitter at ErosToEthos. I'm a functional and archetypal astrologer, and I post a lot about metaphysics as well.
Yes, definitely go check out her stuff. She has done some great work on the Enneads as well. And if you haven't seen the stuff that she's done on the show, please go back and check it out. Now, finally, to the guest himself, And just give me a second. It might take me a little bit to introduce the guy. I'm very excited. But today's guest is one of the key architects of the modern grimoire revival. David Rankine is an author, researcher, and magician whose work since the 1980s has helped reshape how we understand ceremonial magic, Kabbalah, and the occult roots of modern paganism. Someone's mic is getting really bad. Ooh. Yeah, that was yours, Eros. Sorry about that. I had to mute you. That feedback was bad. All right, let me continue. Sorry about this thing. Yes, David's scholarship ranges from the meticulous critical editions of classic grimoires, the veritable Key of Solomon, the Grimoire of Arthur Gauntlet, the Grimoire of Saint Cyprian, the complete Grimoire of Pope Honorius, I'm probably screwing that name up, and a Cunning Man's Grimoire. And don't forget his 2-volume Grimoire Encyclopedia, which maps out the entire spirit book tradition in detail. At the same time, he's a practical teacher of Western esotericism. His book Clavis Intelligentiae, I'm just going to screw that up, Practical Planetary Magic and Practical Elemental Magic, and his Climbing the Tree of Life are great works. Great works for any magician step by step if they want to learn these systems and figure out what's going on with it. For me, this is a very special guest. His elemental and planetary books are staples for me and a constant reference from what I didn't memorize already in his books. For people who have been listening to this show for a while, for the last few years, you probably have heard me mention him plenty of times whenever I've referred to planetary or elemental stuff. I've even pulled up some of his pages to show the associations to show where I got it from. This is the man. So for me, it's amazing to actually have this guy on the show. I never would have thought, I guess maybe 10, 15 years ago when I was getting into this, I'd actually be talking to the man that wrote the book. So David, thank you so much for coming on. This is mind blowing for me. Please, whatever I didn't mention that maybe you want to plug, please let everybody know what your deal is.
Thank you very much. Well, for quite some time now, I suppose my stuff's been very much focused on the grimoires. So you mentioned the Grimoire Encyclopedia, which took me 3 years of daily writing and research to put together, and doing that and getting the panoramic perspective that it gave kind of shaped what's come since. And I wanted to put more practical manual stuff out, which is Clavis Intelligentiarum, and the new one, the follow-on to that, which has just come out, Clavis Spiritum, which is keeping true to the fidelity of the grimoire tradition, but evolving it into the 21st century and restoring bits that have got lost or leaving out bits that don't necessarily need to be there, and trying to make it a lot more accessible for people. And that's kind of been where my focus has been in recent years.
Very nice. I guess, I know you kind of I'm just now kind of specified a little bit, but that I wanted to go on the planetary and elemental magic, but maybe this question would kind of be for the newer ones and those books. What was it that you're bringing to the table that you think actually makes your stuff different than what's out there?
Well, obviously, one thing, it's not different from everyone, but for some, is that I write about stuff that I have practiced and that I get other people to test and practice as well. Because, when I was younger and I saw some books going out that I spoke to the authors of, and they hadn't even done some of the practices they were writing about, which quite horrified me. This is decades ago now. I would stress I'm not making that claim towards any modern authors, but at the time I thought, if I write, I want to make sure I'm writing about things that I've done.
I would hope so.
I think that, well, the feedback I get from people is they like my stuff because it's very accessible and down to earth. But also, it's I'm very academic in the point of view of, well, not academia, but I heavily footnote and reference my stuff so people can see where the material is coming from. They can track things back. But I like to also put things in as simple a form as possible. Because I have this sort of philosophy that magic isn't complex. It's layers for simplicity that build upon each other. And, as soon as you start trying to box stuff and tell people that things are complex, it's when you start putting barriers in front of people. And so if you view it as layers of simplicity that build on each other, it's a much more practical way to approach, and that's kind of reflected in my writings. That it's all that's, you know, as you read through, it's like you can see, oh, this builds on this, this builds on this. What I get told by people is they don't feel that I'm talking down to them, but they feel like they're almost having a conversation with me in the books, because it's just in a nice, simple style. I'm not trying to use lots of big words to impress, and anything that I think might need clarifying, there'll usually be a footnote, or anywhere I'm referring to text, there's usually a footnote so that people, like I say, can see where the thought process was, follow it themselves, and decide if they agree or disagree with the conclusions. You know, I don't claim that my stuff is the only way or the best way. It's like the way that has worked for me. And if other people feed back to me and say it works for them as well, then that's fantastic. Because the reason for me putting the stuff out there is to offer people stuff that I have found, you know, tested and works, and that hopefully will work for them as well. A really good example is, the stuff I've been doing recently with the winds, which is in Clave Spiritum, for spirit conjuration. When I got prompted by my spirits to look into the winds, and then I immediately started looking at texts and went to Sworn Book of Honoris, because it's in there, contacted Stephen Skinner, because he was doing the work on the first book of Summa Sacra Magica at the time, and said, Stephen, can you send me all your stuff on the winds? And he sent that over, and I found the conjuration in there. I did it as part of a conjuration of one of the planetary intelligences, and it was there like that. You know, I was like, wow, okay, that worked really well. And I had a load of questions based on what I was doing in my practice at the time, and I asked about the winds and the intelligence. It was Jophiel, the Jupiterian intelligence. It's like, yeah, absolutely, it's great. Use this, but just add this one line in here. So I added a line in. I then started contacting magicians I knew who do conjuration work, saying, are you doing conjuration in the next few months? And if they were, I was going, do you fancy adding in this winds conjuration for me and trying it? And lots of people. So a couple of dozen people then did the practice, and they added it in, and it was, you know, people working with all different grimoires, with like the Ars Goetia, Grimorium Verum, Key of Solomon, lots of different ones, with demons, angels, Olympic spirits, planetary intelligences.
Nice.
Every single person said the spirit was there by the end of first conjuration at the latest. And then this was after Clavis Intelligentiarum had come out, so I was getting a lot of people messaging me about that, and people saying, I'm going to do my first conjuration and I'm really nervous, and have you got any advice? And I'm going, well, why don't you put this wind conjuration in as well? And the people who'd never done a conjuration before, who added the wind conjuration in, were successful, and it was there by the end of first conjuration again. So I extended my data set, so it wasn't just experienced magicians, but people doing first conjurations. And so far, every single person, we're up to at least 30 conjurations now, has had the spirit there by the end of first conjuration. So that thing which was there at the beginning of the grimoire tradition and then disappeared, I have restored, and I think it's like a key component to bring back in, because the winds are kind of like the Uber for the spirit. So rather than the spirit walking to you, you're sending an Uber for it, and it gets there really fast. So you don't spend hours having to repeat conjurations. So it's a bit of a game changer. So I've written all about that in Clave Spiritum. I kind of dropped the hint on it with the blog I did on it, you know, some months earlier about the return of the winds. That's been like a really big thing for me in recent times. It's been like propagating out there the use of the winds. I think I went a bit tangential there, didn't I?
Actually, you hit on my question. Sorry about that, Nick. David, so this is something that I noted in your interview with Hadean Press on the podcast, is your restoration of the elementals to sort of the grimoire tradition. As you were saying, it became lost. It's very interesting because in Vajrayana, we do have this idea of the wind horse, and then also the 4 cardinal wind protectors who are invoked in every major puja or every major fire offering. So I would say it's a essential part, and it's probably a sort of parallel stream of thinking in my view. So you answered my question, is what I'm saying. I was going to ask you about the elemental, like restoration or rectification back into the tradition, but you kind of addressed it. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. And I thought, I assumed there would be parallels, and so I did check in with other people on that. So, for example, I spoke to my wife's godfather in Palo Mayombe, and he confirmed about the use of the winds to bring in the spirits in Palo, and there's directionality to it, like there is with the winds being in the spirit in the appropriate direction. And also with my Tata in Kimbanda, also that the winds are used in Kimbanda as well. So it's interesting that it's something that's spread around in different traditions, around the world, and that use of the winds, saying it's, I think, a bit more of a universal association of winds and spirits. And you see it in things like the Greek magical papyri as well. And I talk about some of the references I found, in Clave Spiritum. Like there's even a couple of references to the winds in the Quran, associated with the jinn. So yeah, I think this was, and there's a lot of Arabic stuff on the winds that go. It's funny how it just sort of drops out. Really, the conjuration of the winds after the Swan Book of Honorius. So the later grimoires, you might get mention of the classical winds, but there's no using the winds for conjuration. And by the time you get to the more demon-focused period, the grimoires from like 16th, 17th century onwards, and less angelic, you actually get it. And some of them saying, "Oh, it's going to take you hours. And you're going to have to repeat it 5, 7, 9 times." That's not there in the early stuff like Summa Sacra Magica and Swan Book. It's assumed that they're going to turn up first time because you've sent the winds for them.
When I heard you on the Glitch Bottle interview on the podcast, I'm like, wow, dude, it's like he's preaching from the Golden Ass, because there's a section in there. I had to bring it up, Dick. I'm sorry. But there's a section in there where they have this myth of Psyche and Eros, and basically she's taken away on the Zephyrs, right? And so the Zephyrs are doing all the work for the gods. Right. And it's like, well, what happened to that? Where'd that go? That was 2nd century Rome, and then they sort of lost that in the magical tradition later on in the grimoire work. So it's kind of funny, the intersection between the two of them.
Yeah, it's like I said, it does seem to be, I think, something that has been there all over the place, and somehow, as with so many things, it got lost its way. Well, people forgot about it. Things got changed. Things get left out. I mean, for me, like looking for this sort of over the centuries of the grimoire tradition, the way it's changed, it's not always been an evolution. Sometimes stuff that gets left out is better to keep in. And so if an essential component like that gets lost, I think it's really important that it gets restored, which is what I've been, did with Clave Spiritum, and I've been encouraging everyone, and why I've was distributing it so much beforehand and encouraging people before the book got out, because I really wanted other people to be doing it. Like saying the fact that so many people did it and got results was sort of like vindication for that it's an effective practice and it should be there.
Aeolian Revival, if I could suggest a name. Because Aeolus was the master of the winds in ancient Greece, and he's the one who handed the bag of winds to Odysseus, where he zoomed across the Mediterranean. So there's that whole Aeolus sort of magical connection there.
Yeah, I mean, they had the Temple of the Winds in Athens, which has like some of the winds on it. You obviously get a lot more. I've actually kind of started doing a book on the winds, but it's on the back burner because I'm writing 2 books at the moment, the ones I've been pushed to write. And then after those are done, I might get back to the book on the winds I started, because you go for this whole cycle, as you go for antiquity, where you've got 4 winds and then it becomes 6 and it becomes 8 and it even goes up to 24. You get all the sub winds, so you get like the winds of the southeast and all these. But initially it's 3, then it's quite quickly 4. As Matt just mentioned, like Eurus, Boreas, Notus, Zephyrus. Also, Eos as well comes in very heavily, the goddess of the dawn as the mother of the winds. And it's interesting that one of the grimoire things, the Munich Handbook of Necromancy, so it was 15th century, there's a spell in there for a throne that transports the magician, and the angels that do it are nearly all of their names are wind names with al on the end. So you get like Boreal and Zephyral, and it's clearly they're just borrowing the winds and sticking al on the end and saying, oh, it's an angel, when really they're winds. It's like that thing that happens a lot with the grimoires where existing spirits are just repurposed. And I mean, we get that with the gods as well. You know, it's like a different gateway, a different access to gods of the ancient world. They might not have been worshipped, but then they become present in the form of a saint or, you know, a spirit that's called up. I mean, my favorite one of those is, because, you know, Anubis is my patron god, and you get him turning up as St. Christopher, and St. Christopher the Cynocephalus, St. Christopher the dog-headed, which is literally a dog-headed saint who's doing the job of psychopomp, which is Anubis. And it's like, okay, the Egyptians aren't worshipping me anymore. I'll find another way that these dudes can feed me, you know.
Yeah, and it's cool to see also that if we talk about angelic magic, that you have in Hebrew the malach, right? So the messenger. You can place them a little bit like also a hod-like figure, like this air kind of figure, the one that brings the message, the one that brings the thing. So kind of if you want to bring the thing into existence, you already have the image, the fire, you have maybe the feeling, the water. If you don't bring the air, like it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't come. There's no Uber. Like maybe the guy comes, but it's coming by foot. It's going to take ages for that. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, even just point blank how it's even associated with transportation. I mean, what's his face? He's got wings on his boots. I mean,
Mercury, yeah.
Yeah.
Mercury Hermes, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Go ahead,
I was
Robbie.
going to say too, when Zeus translates the messages to Apollo for the oracles, he whispers them in the sense of a whispering wind. So yeah, you see this movement of the airs from the eastern, you know, wind of the demons to the modern. I mean, it's very prolific.
Not to bring it back too far, but David, if you don't mind, I did want to kind of ask you. I do it for most guests that come on. I guess, like, at what point did you make the decision that brought you to be the person we know now? Like, how did you ever even get into this? How did you get inspired, or what set you off to even start getting into the occult, or whatever you call it, magic?
Well, I was interested in stuff when I was younger. I'm not going to claim that it was like a baby thing, you know, like I didn't start when I was. I mean, when I was young, I was very interested in mythology, and when I was like 6, 7, 8, I was reading mythology books in the library, like you do, or like you did back in those days, because there was much less available. So, you know, read about Egyptian and Greek and Norse mythology and fun things like that. I was a very prolific reader as a kid. I used to sort of like read a book a day on average every day. And when I was 10, I worked my way through Carl Jung's collected works, which kind of had a big influence on making me think about the subtle realms and what goes on in the mind and the psyche. I also read the Tao Te Ching, and that became one of my favorite book of all time, like Taoism, and that's been a really big influence through my life. But the defining moment really was when I was 14, because I had a bit of an incident at the school. I went to this boys' grammar school, and somebody tried to stab me with a knife, and I took the knife off them, and it ended up in his leg. And the school wasn't very happy, and so they sent us both to see like these counsellors. And the counsellor said to me, "There's nothing wrong with you. You're just not really directing your energy very effectively. You need to think about, you know, what you're doing with your time." And that really got me thinking. And I walked out of there and bumped into a friend who said, "Hey, I was just like, given this, maybe I thought you might be interested. And he handed me a catalogue from an occult supplier that used to be around called Occultique. It was one of the big suppliers in England back in the 70s, 80s, when there wasn't very much around. And it was like the book catalogue. And I looked at it and, I thought, yeah, I'm going to get some of these books. And I think something was obviously guiding my hand there, because I made an order, and I ordered 6 books. And those 6 books were Crowley's Magic, Techniques of High Magic by Stephen Skinner and Francis King, Eliphas Levi's Transcendental Magic, The Key of Solomon, The Grimoire of Armadale, and The Sacred Magic by Merlin the Mage. So I got those and I read them, and I was like, okay, Techniques of High Magic was the one my 14-year-old brain could relate to the most. So I just started working through doing all the practices in there. It's 2 hours every day, doing pentagram ritual, hexagram ritual, middle pillar, rose cross, visualization, meditation, etc. Took the oath in there, dedicating my life to magic, which when I met Stephen like decades later and we became like best friends, I was like, yeah, thanks for that, Stephen. kind of. And so that was the moment, really. It's like, I suppose, when somebody just handed me that catalogue at just the right moment, and I looked through it and went, I'm going to get these books. And then I just started the practices, and it went from there.
Yeah. Wow. What was I mean, you mentioned the hexagram and the pentagram ritual. I guess, I mean, this is just because of my experience. When I started getting interested into ceremonial magic, I started looking at Golden Dawn and OTO stuff, and that's how I came across those rituals. Was that because you were like interested in like the Golden Dawn or Thelemic stuff? Or like, how did you even come across those rituals to perform?
Well, I mean, Techniques of High Magic was got them in, so I just started doing them from the book. When I was 18, I was in a magical lodge that's very old school that was derived from Stella Matutina. And one of the first things they did was like get me to perform the pentagram ritual and say, how do you do it? And I showed them the MT, Master Temple was like, yeah, that's not bad. Here's some recordings of Israel Regardie doing it so you can like improve how you vibrate your Hebrew and stuff. Because it had been set up under the auspices of Regardie, this lodge. And they knew. And so I then, that's it from there. I love the pentagram ritual. I've done loads of workshops on it with people. I've amended it based on, it was changed a little bit in the way it was done in the group because Regardie had some thoughts on ways it could be improved. And so we took those on board and made some slight differences to the way it's done. And I've actually recently, in the last couple of years, changed it up a little bit again, in that I now, instead of being before me Raphael, before me Michael, because you're facing east and east direction of fire, and then so on my right hand, Raphael. So then you have the Michael Gabriel axis, front and back, and then Raphael Uriel, right and left. And I prefer that because for many years I've been working with the Fire East, Air South, that Levi switched, and modern magic just took on board wholesale, which kind of destroys the whole thing of elemental theory, of like the associations of the hot, cold, wet, dry axis and the qualities of the elements being shared with the ones on either side.
Right.
And so, yeah, I just made some changes and work it in my slightly varied way. I'm actually thinking of doing a blog post on that, actually, just throw it out there, see if other people want to play with that. Hexagram ritual I didn't really like as much because it's a good example of what you see in quite a lot of the older stuff, what I'd call like a hollow ritual, like it's form without force, that there isn't any visualization or anything given for the hexagram ritual. You have to like make up your own visualizations for it, whereas the pentagram ritual is a whole complete little system in itself. And I love the pentagram ritual. You're combining voice work with movement and body work and visualization. It's a really good package for practicing and honing your skills as a daily practice. But some of the things like the hexagram ritual, they're a bit hollow. They don't have all that in them.
I can see that. One thing I wanted to ask, if I remember correctly, with the hexagram ritual, isn't there even debate on fire and air being switched around? I'm wondering, like, does that, the way you're doing your pentagram ritual, does that match the hexagram like the same way?
I can't
You
remember
understand
the
what I'm
last time.
saying? How I think facing to the east, sometimes people want to do the fire one instead of the air. I think the same thing. I've heard debates over that.
Well, if they were wanting to do fire in the east, I would totally go along with that, because that's the symbolism I like to work with.
Yeah. The reason why
it's
I asked,
many years since I've done.
Go ahead. Sorry.
So I was saying that it's many years since I've done the hexagram.
Oh.
Pentagram I still use. Okay, I like the pentagram ritual. However, if I do the pentagram ritual, what I do now is add in beforehand, the thing I created, the license to remain, because I have my own spiritual court of spirits that are around me, and I don't want to be insulting them by, you do that from the pentagram ritual, you basically just push everything out the area, so it's completely neutralized, neutral space. So, giving the permission to the spirits around you, or any house spirits or genius loci if you're outdoors, to remain while you do it, so that you're not insulting, any of those spirits when you do the pentagram ritual.
The reason I even asked that is because I'm just taking a guess. I could be wrong, but I know, like, for me, when I used to, let's say if I wanted to do planetary work, I would start off with banishing with pentagram ritual first, and then move into the hexagram ritual. I'm thinking maybe if you did that thing with the fire in the east, you just want it kind of uniform with those two going together.
Yeah,
makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense, and that's what I used to do many years ago as well. Like you say, it's pentagram then hexagram. My dissatisfaction with the hexagram was why I created the heptagram ritual that's in Practical Planetary Magic. Jumping back to one of the things that you said earlier, you wanted to talk about those books, and that was the hexagram ritual was the inspiration for me to make a heptagram, because I thought, well, the heptagram's 7 for the planets, and let's bring in the Greek vowels, because there's 7 vowels, and that's something where we can put all of those things that are missing from the hexagram ritual into a planetary ritual that just has a bit more completion to it.
Yeah. A real quick question, if you don't mind me asking. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. No, just gonna say you could even do an octagram one within the 8 directions, right? Like the 4 cardinal and the other 4 crossing. That would be really nice as well.
We do 10. I'm just gonna say.
Very. There's like the 8. So looks like your sort of chaosphere thing as well. What would you choose for the 8? Would you put planet Earth in as number 8 there? If you're going with 7 classical planets, because it makes sense for Earth to be the 8th one. And if you look certainly in the grimoires, you have the 7 directions attributed on the quarters and cross quarters, but northeast is the one that doesn't have one, and that's traditional place for entering the circle. And I know from chatting with like Stephen Skinner that in Chinese magic as well, they have the thing of like northeast is where the magician comes in for Chinese sorcery, and so that again seems to be one of those things that you find in several systems that you've got the 7 and then the sort of the empty. So there's an argument for empty, but then you close it, obviously, and then it's sealed. So that's why I'm saying it would kind of make sense for planet Earth to be there, because you're sealing it off and then transforming the space so it's kind of raised, separate from the mundane. So an octagram would have a logical place, as we say, Matt. Yeah.
It is interesting to, sorry, Nick, to note, David, that we do face our altars northeast as well in Vajrayana. So, and we do have 10 directions, but one of those is the 2 poles moving up and down, which are also contained in the inner channels, of course. But you could also say, in terms of gross planetary bodies, that so you have the 7, and then you have also the 9. So we have Rahu and Ketu, which, although are shadow planets, and they are assigned to the north and south node of the moon, they actually are planets in and of themselves. And I posit that you can actually map Rahu to Uranus and Ketu to Neptune, if you want to use a contemporary system. it's a speculative idea, but I think I can make a case for it.
I've seen other people making case for the same thing. So, yeah, I think definitely you could absolutely make a case, as you say, for that.
Oh, nice. Chin's like, damn, I thought that was my idea. It's happened to me.
I never think it's my idea because I recognize that Kabbalah you can just map everything to the tree, right? So people from first principles can sort of reconstitute how things should look. And I think that was also my experience, just using my kind of like my system and my view of it in a Buddhist way and just mapping it to the tree and being like, okay, let's look at the Sefer Yetzirah and like, and map it to the Tantric, the Mahavijja system. So that's how I came to that conclusion. I don't think it definitely didn't solely originate with me, but I think I can make a case for it of my own.
Well, so, does anybody have any questions before I ask some more here? No? All right. I guess if you don't mind.
One,
go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick one. How do you, I mean, now I've been working quite some years with spirits and so on, David, but how do you understand them? Like if someone were to ask, what are they? How would you explain it from your point of view, since you've been working with them? Because I know maybe some schools don't, like they'll think differently and so on, but how do you personally understand them? I think that's an interesting thing.
It depends on the type of spirits, but if we go with, like, for example, celestials and infernals, then they are, distinct entities that are not and generally have never been human, unlike the dead, for example, or some spirits in other traditions where they're from the ancestors and people who have died. In some respects, they're quite unknowable because they are so different from us. But again, if we say angels and demons, by and large, they are mostly airy, sometimes fiery beings in the point of view of where their elements are. That's why one of the reasons I really like the Olympic spirits is because it specifically talks about that there are the Olympic spirits balance all four elements in them, that they contain air, fire, and water. And that balance in them might be one of the reasons why they are so friendly and easy to work with, and why I always recommend the Olympic spirits or the planetary intelligences to people starting conjuration. They're the ones that you're likely to be the politest and friendliest and easiest to work with, and you get really good results with them as well. People want to jump in and be dark and scary, let's do this demonic stuff, but way better to get your house in order and do the other stuff with the spirits that have more balance to them. And then you'll also, by and large, you'll probably find that you don't need to work with the other ones. So if you can get everything you need from working with a couple of Olympic spirits, why go off and then start working with loads of other ones? I don't understand the logic of that. I don't conjure tons of different spirits all over the place. I've got a few that I work with that they do everything I need. If I need something, why would I then go off and start calling up other ones? I don't need to create new bonds and obligations if I've already got ones that can do it. And you see that in some of in something like Kimbanda, like Uresha or Pompagira, if they can't do the task, they'll just contract out to another one, and then they'll tell you what you're going to have to offer. And so you're going to have to use this ponto and do these offerings and possibly make this offering and sing these songs, etc. And they'll just subcontract out. And there's that in the grimoires as well, to an extent, when you have some of the intermediary spirits like Skirlin and the Grimoire Verum, and also the demon bishops I have found from my own experience, where they can say, okay, you want this job done. This is the best person for the job. This is the one you need to call on. So yeah, I think it's really a case of getting the right one for the job, but not overplaying it. They're not Pokemon cards. You don't need to collect them all. You don't need to do it all. I've got the Osgorisha, I must now conjure all 72. That's really not a good idea if you start looking at the description. One of them, it basically tells you that it's not really going to be very helpful, but it's going to try and make sure you get killed. Why would you want to call that one up, for example? You know what I mean? It's back to that thing of keep it simple, my layers of simplicity. Don't create unnecessary relationships if you've got a small group of things that work really well for you. That's the way I do it and suggest to other people.
Nice, thanks.
Since you put out those the elemental and the planetary books, has your own practice and like what you even like I guess study and look at changed till now?
It's changed a huge amount because those things were done when I was very much working, running groups, and they were sort of a lot of stuff that's focused on group magic. For the last 15 years, most of the work I've done has been, the grimoire stuff has been solitary. There's been times where I've worked with other people because I've been doing the grimoire stuff for 44 years. But in recent years, it's been mainly me doing solo stuff and occasionally with other people. So it's changed from the point of view of my magic is really focused on more solitary practice, and as a result, having to have everything sorted for yourself is such a different dynamic to when you're working with other people. I like group stuff, but it's just not been practical. Excuse me, of necessarily being in the right location or having the right people available to do things with at the times you want to do stuff. So that, my practices have changed a huge amount. And, I did do conjuration in the past with groups I ran as well at times. Like, for example, back in the 90s and noughties, Alexandrian covens that I ran, I would focus on, the thing with Wicca is that it's, the Book of Shadows is like a skeleton. You've got to put the muscles and the sinews and the flesh on it. Excuse me. And so any group that I was, high priest of, with the blessing of the high priestess, obviously, but all the covens that I've co-run has been with wives, so that's not been a problem. That there would be a lot of ritual magic training thrown in there. So people, if they're in a coven with me, they're going to get a lot of ritual magic training. And I also wanted them to experience conjuration. So I would do conjuration of the Olympic spirits with the coven so they could experience it for themselves, which was great because it meant you could do it in an experimental way. So, for example, rather than just having one scryer, having 3 scryers who could and would see if they all got the same answers to the questions that were asked to the Olympic spirit, or if they got different answers, because that would, there would be implications on that. And by and large, they were getting hearing the same answer from the spirit. So that was an interesting thing. But for them to sort of understand that Wicca, has its place, and for some people it's the right thing, but there's other things as well. And so I wanted people to see some of the other options that they could do. And I know a lot of Wiccans, it's not necessarily the only practice. They might have other things they do as well. I know some old school Wiccans who are really into grimoire stuff, for example. It's just not getting into that box. Oh, I do Wicca and I can't do anything else. I once offended an old school Wiccan, somebody actually who was in Gardner's original coven. We were having a conversation, and he was saying, I've been doing Wicca for 40 years. And I said, what do you do? He said, we do the 8 Sabbats a year and the 13 Hezmats. I was like, what about daily practice? Well, I've never done a daily practice in my life. And I was like, what? So that's the only magic you do? So, and basically, the high priestess and the high priest, because it was Gardner's original coven, they did pretty much all the work anyway. So the people just learned by watching, and they didn't get the stuff explained. And I was like, wow, okay. And then I said to him, I said, well, this might sound rude, but I would rather work with someone who'd done a year's daily practice than someone who's had 40 years of occasional rituals, because they have put in the discipline and persistence and will have got more from that. And then I said the bit that I was young at the time, so it was a bit of an arsehole move, because I said to him, 40 years of shit is still shit, which looking back, I now think that was just like the arrogance of youth, and that was not a really very nice thing to say, even if
You could think
there
it
might
just
be an element of truth in it. It was still a pretty rude thing to say. But I was in my early 20s at the time, and at that age, back in those days in the 80s, it was like it was a very different scene to the world now.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But to me, that is a huge thing that I see. There's a big absence of the whole thing of, particularly in the early years, the importance of daily practice. It makes such a solid foundation. You've got to be doing your meditation, your visualization, your breath work, etc., on a daily basis to strengthen those muscles, the imagination, the mental muscles, etc., for effective practice. If you can't visualize something, how are you going to have an effective intent to a spell, etc.? So people just want to jump in and start, in the deep end and drown. They can, but for me, the daily practice thing is absolutely essential.
I was going to ask you that. What would be? Well, I was going to ask you back in the days when you put out the pentagram, pentagram, the elemental, and the planetary books. What was your daily practice like back then? The reason I asked you was probably very close to what mine was. That's why I asked.
Back then, I was, although I haven't done it for many years since, I was doing the heptagram as a daily, and switching up the heptagram, starting according to the planet of the day. I was doing quite a lot of devotional work at the time. I've gone through phases in my life where if I'm not doing a lot of active stuff, then I'll just be doing on a daily basis. I have to do something. It'll just be simple meditation, visualization, and possibly, and then I want to do a devotion to a particular deity for a month or a few months or something. So I was doing a lot. At the time, I was doing a lot of stuff with Hecate and Hermes. So there was devotional stuff with them, and then I had a daily energetic practice that I created that I was doing every day that I did for decades. But I've actually stopped doing now after my spirit said it's a great practice, but it's actually blocking some of your sensitivity. And it's true that I found that my psychism has kind of spiked and got a lot better since I stopped the practice. So it's great sort of energetic walls, as it were, but those walls were also keeping out stuff that I needed to come in. So you can overshield.
So we got a question from the audience. He says, how much has the occult ritual forms changed over the last 25 to 50 years?
Well, it's changed a lot. I mean, back in the 80s, got to late 80s when chaos magic really hit. I had a lot of friends who were on the chaos magic scene. I was kind of involved a bit. I used to write under a pseudonym for Chaos International back in the days. So there's some of my material in there. But with chaos magic, there was really that thing of stripping the stuff back and just getting to technique and practice. And I'm all in favor of focusing on technique and practice. I think it kind of lost its way a bit myself personally, Byron. But there are good people doing the stuff. And what I found interesting is a lot of people in chaos magic have often then come back and found themselves being very focused into something like Norse magic and the runes, for example, or Tantra, or really heavily into breath work. It's they end up not being that chaotic. Most of the chaos magicians I know are actually the most ordered and structured people going. So chaos magic is really good because it was a bit like the punk of magic. Let's get rid of all the detritus and what we don't need, and go back and let's focus on what actually works for us. And so it really pushed that key thing of, doing magic that works if it's not working, what are you doing? You know, you need to either change it up, look at what's going wrong, or switch to something else that does work. So that was a big shift. The internet changed things massively as well. You know, from the mid 90s on, you initially get the BBL boards and stuff where people were then able to start communicating and finding out. Because prior to that, you know, you go back to the 80s, it was really hard to find people. There was the occasional conference, but certainly in the UK, conferences. I was part of the first Philemic Symposium in 1986 in Oxford, and that was the kind of first thing of its kind where we had this symposium. Like Phelamites came from like all over Europe, and a couple even came from the States. For this gathering, we had really good speakers. That's it. You know, we had Mike McGee, Lionel Snell, David Rietti, who was in the Caliphate at the time, who's passed since. Can't remember who else. But it was really, and it was a great gathering. And suddenly there was a sense of community there. Like we had like 100 sort of Phelamites from all over the place getting together, and people starting to make connections. The internet enabled people to make those connections online immediately, rather than having to try and find out about events that you'd only find out about if you subscribed to certain magazines where the events are advertised, or went into a magical bookshop that you've tracked down and they happen to have an advert up. And so that proliferation has meant that people have shared a lot more. And so there's been a lot more exchange and change. There's also been, you know, since the early noughties, things growing and blooming, like the grimoire tradition. There was very little grimoire stuff. The odd book done prior to early 2000s. You know, then you had Joseph Peterson doing all his amazing stuff and his, Esoteric Archives website, and Stephen Knife-Hand and Golden Horde, and putting out the Sourcework series, and then loads of other people started doing really good stuff, and the grimoire tradition really blossomed, and folk magic has become really big. So there's been loads of changes. Another one is there's a lot more spirit-based magic now than there was, and one thing that I'm really happy about is that back in the 80s, 90s, to a lesser extent the noughties as well, even, people were not really paying attention to the dead. People weren't doing a lot of ancestral stuff or working with spirits dead. It was like this whole thing of that's actually, we'll just do something at Samhain and remember the dead, and then the rest of the year it's like we won't even think about them. But it's like they don't go away; they're there the whole time. You know, it's like, and so I think the ATRs particularly have been influential in making people pay a lot more attention to the influence of the dead and of the ancestors, and that's become a lot more present in a lot of people's workings, which is something I'm very happy about, because I think that's something that got influenced by early people like Crowley. You know, Crowley's comment about spiritualism being akin to necrophilia, and he had a very negative attitude to that. And Crowley is such a two-edged sword. Some of his material has been great and transformational, and some of it was such a screw up. Like his attitude of the Ars Goetia spirits being parts of the human psyche that he postulated and then wavered on. But so loads of people go, oh yeah, the demons are just part of my mind. No, they're bloody not. So yeah, there have been a huge amount of changes. I think there's a lot more good practice available, but there's also been a huge proliferation in bullshit. And people who don't know what they talk about posting on TikTok and other places. So it's a case of one of the things that the last 50 years has really brought in is people really need to have their discernment filters on when they're engaging, especially online. Okay, rant over.
So I was going to ask, coming from the elemental base of mythology and bringing that forth in regard to your traditions when you're doing your research, how far back into these traditions are you digging?
With the grimoire stuff, I'm going back as far as I can. The grimoires proper kind of start really from about the 12th century. 12th to 13th century.
Right.
But you've got 4 threads that really feed into the grimoires, which is from the Greek, and as I'll go back to that, Arabic, Jewish, and Latin Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, with those, we can then take some of them further back. So the Greek stuff is influenced by Egypt and Sumer, for example. Right. So we you can look at things where you can say there is a continuity of idea and practice. It's not. Right. I'm not saying it's not an unbroken line all the way back to Egypt and Sumer from the grimoires, but there is a continuity of practice. The use of the magic circle, having spirits in the directions, having guardians, but it's all various things like this. Then we look at the Arabic. Obviously, one component of the Arabic is that they preserved a lot of the Greek material that otherwise would have been lost. But also the Arabic, you also get a feed in there from India and possibly China. I mean, a good example of that is the Mansions of the Moon, because, the Mansions of the Moon, people talk about in the Picatrix and the grimoires and how it comes from the Arabs, but the Arabs got it from the Greeks, who write about the Mansions of the Moon, and then the Greeks got it from India. So that's actually an Indian idea that has fed via Greece into the Arabic and then into the European grimoire tradition. So it's really travelled. So yeah, I look to try and track back as far as I can in history and then present what I found. And I'm sure I think there's a lot more needs to be done on the Indian connection for a start. Because obviously the fact that India did have that connection to Greece means that there's probably more stuff that needs to be looked at with connections there that hasn't really been done yet. So yeah, as far as possible is my answer, as far as I can.
Yeah. Admirable. That's what it's all about, is really digging in and finding the true essence and juice of what these things are about. That's what I really enjoy about it all.
Me too.
Well, even Parmenides could be said to be part of the Greek sort of grimoire tradition, because his On Nature verse that started off ontology and all the rest of these philosophical movements was based in the castle of the Queen of the Night. So he's actually having some sort of a divine experience as he's describing things like formal logic for the first time in at least ancient Greece. So there's a lot of that grimoire tradition that sort of carries through into philosophy through the Neoplatonics even. And so a lot of that, it doesn't get recognized as such, but if you look at the way that it's written, it's clearly talking about communicating with spirits and gods.
Right.
Well, I have a follow-up. Oh, sorry, David. My apologies.
That's right. The Neoplatonic thing is, some people aren't very keen on Neoplatonism, but it's a really big influence because you get sort of the Christian thing of Neoplatonic stuff, like with Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagus, who's the guy who writes the Celestial Hierarchies, which is the first sort of cataloguing of the 9 orders of angels, which then goes throughout the whole of Christianity. And you also get people in the Renaissance like Giordano Bruno, who are sort of doing Neoplatonic stuff and bringing in the whole idea then of the image magic, astral magic, as astral in the sense of its image, and bringing in that side of things and going off onto stuff like memory palaces, and it goes all over the place. So absolutely, that is a huge influence, and there's so much cross-fertilization. No magical system, unless it's on some island in the middle of the Pacific or something, exists in operation. There's always been all this cross-fertilization and syncretization that's gone on. And that, going back to the earlier comments somewhere about how things have changed, that's one of the things I think we've seen in recent years, is there's a lot more cross-fertilization and syncretization between different groups where people are recognizing the value. And it's not about appropriation, it's about recognizing, hey, this works really well. I mean, somebody asked me, how do you decide whether you're appropriating or not if you include something from another practice? And my answer to that was, I will look if there are parallels to what I see that I like anywhere in my tradition. And if there are, then I can work from those roots. If there aren't, then I'm not going to appropriate it. But, it's the parallels thing. It's like with the winds, there's parallels. So often there are parallels because, the way the human mind and spirit works, we're all kind of flowing in the same general direction. So nothing is going to be unique.
I think it's interesting what you just you guys were kind of just saying now in so many words. And it was even a topic of a show that I had thought of doing on my own, because like I have covered so many people recently, and some of them are even on the Gnostic Saints. Doing shows on certain alchemists or occultists in the past. I don't think, and the reason why I even want to do it, and not to be tit for tat, but like in the conspiracy community and podcasting, Christian podcasters will be the first one to call people like me Satanists. And I think it's pretty funny if you were to actually realize how many people that I'm interested in actually shaped your idea of Christianity. It's fucking they have zero clue, obviously.
Well, in the amount of Neoplatonism that ended up in Christianity it's a huge influence during the Renaissance. So yeah.
Also, Dave, sorry, Nick, to follow up though to Nick's point, David, do you think that people, this has been a point of contention on the panel before? I take the pro sort of Aeon of the Sun pro Christianity in a way, the esoteric sort of layer camp. I'm pro that, but do you think we should respect the context of Christianity in terms of the grimoire tradition and how it arises, and that perhaps it's not super useful always to create dialectical poles against like certain, more I always say outer temple religion for outer temple people. So there's always got to be there has to be a catch-all for like those people, and maybe it's more useful to speak to them in their language rather than try and impose your worldview or will on them. I don't know. Just what do you think of that?
Well, I mean, I recently wrote about the grimoires. I mean, the grimoires are essentially in the Christian framework. It's the Christian cosmology. There are elements from elsewhere, but by and large, and the battery that it is operated on is 1,500 years of Christianity. So it's a hugely powerful battery. But I say the Christianity of the grimoires is quite more heretical in the sense that it's not the Christianity of churches and priests and congregations. It's a Christianity of there's these spirits and I can deal with them directly. And it doesn't need to be done in the church. In fact, preferably outdoors, because all the early grimoire stuff is all about doing it away from people where you're not going to get caught and in trouble for doing these strange rituals which the church wouldn't approve of. And some people struggle with the fact that there is such a Christian framework to the grimoires. And there's been Jake Stratton-Kent's Geosophia is a good example, looking at the Greek roots with the Goes and things. That is one of the big feeding factors in. I mean, I don't agree that it's the only one. Jake stresses that really heavily. I think the Jewish influence is hugely significant and has been underrated. Because back in 2005 in Climbing the Tree of Life, I said I think there's a macabre influence into the grimoires, for example, which I was really happy to discover there's actually stuff from a macabre text in Summa Sacra Magicae proving my point that I was correct. There was. But there are components of the grimoires which you can see there from earlier times. I mean, there's all the Canaanite names of God that the Jews nabbed that's in the Bible, for example, that get used. Right. And one of the things I've added in to the way I do grimoire stuff, and it's in Clave Spiritual now, is having the Shekinah there, so that you have the balance of divine feminine and divine masculine, which completely transforms the circle, the magic circle that you do conjuration in, because it brings the whole thing of the divine wisdom, and there's a grace and a fluidity and beauty to the practice with it. And apart from anything else, we all have a fragment of the Shekinah in us as the spark of our soul, means that if you're working with the Shekinah, you're actually activating the divine fragment of yourself. So you have the authority to deal with the spirits. So that's not classically a part of the tradition, but to me, it's something that entirely makes sense. And it's something that I got pushed by my spirits to look at. And I looked and thought, there's a lot of references in the grimoires that kind of hint at her presence without it ever being said. To me, that was enough of a reason to bring the Shekinah into the conjuration sequence. And I found, works like a dream, and the spirits are really happy about it as well, that I work with, that, the Shekinah has been made a part of the sequence.
I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree with you, Dave. Sorry,
ahead.
Headless. I absolutely agree with you, David, obviously, because in Vajrayana and in Tantra more generally, of course, you have the Shiva and the Shakti, or the breath and the compassion, or the couple in Yavyam, in divine union, if you want to call it that. So I absolutely agree with that. And I also wanted to sort of follow up on your idea of syncretism in Central Asia, like through the Mughalized Indians. There's a lot of interesting scholarship about how they were actually taking tantric ideas specifically from Kashmir and then sort of encoding them into this Mughalized Persianified Arabic that they repackaged and then sold to or gave to the sort of Arab bankers who were the supporters of their court. So I think that scholarship is just beginning now, but I think it does answer, at least respond to some of the things that you were thinking about, how a lot of Indian ideas were not necessarily laundered, but sort of traded along into the greater Arabic grimoire tradition.
Well, I was going to ask a quick question about aura reading. Do you use aura viewing or aura reading within your practices? Because what I've found is, like, if you go back to the ancient texts, they could be describing that, especially with things like the Shekinah glory. Like, they're looking at some sort of an envelope of energy around these people that we see translated in artwork as the, the halo or these other things. But the act of viewing could be a form of, like, Gnostic sight, right? You're looking at the world with different eyes. So we see that a lot in all of the ancient texts as well. Did you have any experience with that?
I do at times see people's auras, and it's always very interesting to see where the dominances are, like color wise, and yes, and what I have on a similar vein to that is remote viewing with permission, people doing ritual and being able to then see the auras of the practitioners while they're doing it, and seeing the circle and the things is a really interesting practice. I think it's actually a really rewarding thing to do, because it gives another level of experiential certainty. Give a funny example of this. Many years back in 1987, I was leading a ritual in Oxford. It was a public ritual on the sort of hillside in these woods just outside of Oxford, and we had about 80 people. This is a group that was doing stuff for animal rights, and there was 3 sort of local hippies who were sitting on the hill watching us, and we did the ritual. And afterwards, they came up and they were like, "Wow, man, thanks for the light show." These guys were tripping off their brains on acid, and said, "Well," these guys then described to us. Amazingly, they were coherent enough to describe it, but they're like, when the circle had been drawn, they'd seen this like white fire going all around, and when the particular goddess and god had been called, the person who called the goddess had seen this cascade of energy come into them, and they'd seen a different color one for the guy doing the god, and they were describing all the aura stuff that was going on just from this, because they were in that state tripping on the acid, that they were actually seeing the energetic component of the ritual, because they were described exactly all the things that happened. And these were people who had no understanding or experience of magic. And so that
hypersensitivity.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I really push with people. Anyone I train, is like one of the first things you've got to work on is your visualization, because daily visualization practice, even if you think I'm a psychic as a turnip, right? It helps open you up. It helps develop your power to visualize, but that also increases your psychic sensitivity and will make you more sensitive doing that as daily practice, particularly over the years. And so, yeah, I think that thing of being able to see what's going on energetically is like a really useful thing to have there.
Yeah, I'd say even using other senses sometimes, if you have them like more easily for you, for example, the smell or the taste or whatever, that's also very, let's say it enhances also the whole situation, the whole experience. And I completely agree with this idea of also, like you were saying earlier, like making other people try and test the thing that you're doing, or maybe be there. Like in this case, you mentioned it was kind of by chance, right? The people were there. But if you can do it reliably, it also helps I had my mom go up the tree as I was doing a practice that I was doing in Swan. And it was funny because, I mean, I never taught her Kabbalah, anything. But as she was describing each of the things in the spheres, she was like completely doing the correspondence. And I went, okay. To me, that's a very good sign. You know, like the person never heard about it and they can see the thing working and get the association. So that's very cool. You know. So,
I mean, psychic senses, actually, in Clavis Spiritum, I wrote a chapter about the senses in conjuration, and also the psychic aspects of them, like clairauditory, clairolfaction, etc. And how those can be subtle, help with picking up signs that the spirits have arrived, because the visual image of them in the crystal isn't always necessarily the first thing. And even taste. I mean, I've had it on more than one occasion when it's been a martial spirit where I've got like a metallic tang in my mouth, like a psychic taste that spirit has turned up. It's like, okay, I know you're in the ball, so time to show yourself, please. So not to underestimate those psychic senses and the fact they will develop through doing magic. Even if you go in thinking I'm completely psychically a brick, I'm a zero, you will not remain at that state. If you're doing your daily practices, you're doing visualization, meditation, etc., you're doing rituals, those muscles will develop and your psychism will increase.
And I was going to say, when you get into just the long-standing tradition of following this back as far as we can into the ancient myths of history, this is something that people have been participating with. So in essence, there's a genetic memory that kind of carries through the whole as the entirety of humanity. Yeah,
and things like fragrance is a great one, because smell is the strongest sense associated with memory. And we're going back to to our caveman days with the use of fragrance, whether it's pine resin or stuff being thrown on the fire or what have you. And spirits love sweet, pleasant smells as well. So the importance of the other senses, people should not underestimate it. And like I say, those build into our heritage.
Yeah, even incense.
It's almost like
use incense to help with let's say you already have like the whatever, how you do your practice, right? Maybe you have like candles, maybe you have some other stuff, like the incense then with the specific smell might also help to connect with it. Sorry, Hedges.
Fumigation. It's all over the ancient world. They're always fumigating, and that's a big part of it. But I think that it's this web of associations that we see as the Kabbalah tree and all the rest of these things that come out of the ritual magic. Like they start to understand things better by getting to know these spirits and seeing all of these vast myriad associations with them as sort of like that starting point for an understanding of the world around them.
Yeah, the doing of it, and then getting into this the spirit ecology of that. There's all the subtle stuff that's going on. That's another point I always make when people say, well, how do you know any of this stuff you're doing is real? And I was go, how do you know electricity is real? How do you know X-rays are real? These things that you can't see, but you see their effects, you know they're there. You see 1/70th of the light spectrum. What about the other 69/70ths? It's the same principle with working with spirits and subtle energies. We know from experience that they're real. We have direct experience of them. So that is the difference, isn't it? It's like the experience, like experiential stuff. It's real. You can get on and do it. And once somebody has had an experience that confirms it for them, that's usually when the practice tends to take on more solidity, I think, for many people.
And the belief itself precipitates higher forms of experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because I saw it on Twitter yesterday that now, I mean, we already have virtual vision, right? Like we are seeing each other through a virtual thing. We are hearing each other through a virtual thing. And then yesterday I saw they were doing some virtual smelling. So they put like an ultrasound thing on a olfactory bulb or whatever inside. And then you can smell something that is not there. So like, again, I'm smelling the thing, but it's not there. How can I say it's real? Well, you're sensing it. So there's this like kind of digital sense that we all have. So it doesn't necessarily have to be there, or even like Wi-Fi, all those things, like we're saying, they happen, they exist. So there's
And
when you get
and
serious,
even
there's no point of saying no, they don't exist because it's there. So.
yeah. But when you get into the old tabernacle and the traveling tent, and they would burn the incense. I mean, the incense, even in the oldest texts, go back to, the children of Noah and Adam and Eve, and the Magi bringing the incense. And so then you get into modern theater now, and you have technological advances where they're actually having theater where they're spraying smells in your face to heighten the level of the experience. So this is all ways that ritual magic traditionally has precipitated these means, and now it's being utilized by modern technology in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, so much goes on that is magical practice or technique being used that people don't even realize. I mean, the one that always makes me laugh is the use of production sigils in logos for businesses and things.
For sure.
Or the
And
fact
that's
that
what
the Starbucks mermaid is actually, Melusine, the fairy queen.
Yeah,
I love
sure.
that one.
Nice. I like how you brought that up. Yeah, it's always been a quite obvious one. Yeah. Especially when you start getting into magic, you're like, oh wow, these sigils are everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, or even astrology. People say, "Oh, I don't believe in astrology," but then you go study marketing. They have 12 archetypes, and you can map pretty clearly one of them to each of the astrology signs. And then it's like, okay, well, guess what? Like, you want to call them archetypes, and that's cool, but it's there, so it exists.
And color theory, the use of color, that's another big one.
Yeah.
Huge. Yep. Before I start asking some more stuff about your recent work, not to put you on the spot, Eros, was there anything you wanted to ask? I know you haven't been quiet, so I wasn't sure if you were just like nervous to butt in or whatever.
I guess I'm just focused. I do have some questions. What does your daily practice look like now? Like, how has your relationship to magic changed over the years? Like, did you used to do certain practices and they've evolved, or you've realized, like we go through different phases maybe sometimes where it's like I'm working with this more, and then you start working with something else more. Like, I just wonder how that journey has been for you.
These days, my daily practice is really simple. It's just like meditational, energetic practice that I do. I have a 2-year, 9-month-old daughter, so most of if she's in the house and awake, she's with me. She's very daddy focused, so that takes a large chunk of my time. So then, factoring in the time when she's asleep or at nursery, I have to do my editing work and try and get writing done, have a bit of time for my wife. So I don't have a lot of time practice-wise. If I need to do stuff, then I will make the time for it. For example, I quite often make Solomonic pentacles for people. And so that is going to need to be certain timings. It's going to have to be on a waxing moon. It's going to have to be on the appropriate day and hour. So I've got to time that accordingly. And then likewise, the consecration times. I'm not doing so much conjuration since she was born because I don't have the time to do a 7-day purification prep for working with a new spirit. So the stuff I've done has just been with spirits I have familiarity with, having worked before, where I can get away with 3 days purification, or with spirits I have pact with where I don't need to do any and I can just ask them because I've been pacted with them for a very long time. And that's kind of where my practice is at. I mean, in the past, when I started, it was 2 hours a day every day for the first 7 years. And then it became just trying different things out, like I did, for example, I was working through Crowley's Magic, so I did Libra Reshval Helios for a few months as a daily practice where you do durations of the sun at the 4 quarters of the day. And actually doing the Libra Stati from that as a 9-month practice was what really got me into doing devotional stuff. And there's over the years been a lot of, I'm going to do 3 months for Shiva, or 3 months for goddess Mart or what have you. I did quite a lot of work with Indian, particularly Kali and Shiva, and my first wife was half Indian and very into those sort of those deities, so I ended up doing a lot of things with her. And back then, daily yoga was part of my practice. For example, like half an hour or so a day of daily yoga. These days, I do Tai Chi. So I kind of see that as daily practice as well, because that's energetic work. And, I love Tai Chi. It's just, that sort of energy flow it gives you is really invigorating and helps, I think, just with general health as well. But to me, there's a very spiritual component to this being in yourself and in the moment and the flow of Tai Chi. So that's really where my practice has shifted depending on circumstances a lot. So I kind of hope that answers the question. But in the past, it was much more lots of daily stuff, lots, because I had the time. Now at 60 and with a young child, I don't have time. So I just do the simpler stuff that keeps it ticking over. And then when I need to, I'll do something accordingly.
Do you ever find that some spirits or archetypes are harder for you to access than others? Like maybe you're naturally, you naturally connect to some easier than others?
There are some that I've never really, some that I've worked with far less than others. Possibly because of the circumstances not having needed to. For example, I've never worked with Venusian spirits for myself, but I have done work with Venusian spirits for other people for things like fertility, for somebody wanting to have a child, for example. I've not really worked that much with martial spirits, although I say that, but then I have a martial spirit pacted to me that offered their services many years back. I have one on tap, but I don't really work with them that much. I think there are some. I think it has been probably more by affinity, like that. I've worked mainly with solar, Jupiterian, Mercurial, and lunar spirits. Those are the four. And I suppose after that would then come Saturn and Mars and Venus at the bottom. But I mean, I'm a Leo, and I have a very balanced chart in the sense of equal elements, and it's very strong Mercury influence in my chart. So the Sun Mercury thing isn't really a surprise. What kind of where most of my affinity is.
So that's why you're drawn to the psychopomps. Maybe.
Yes, it would make sense. But I do have a lot of strong Mercury influence in my chart, very much.
David, would you consider the Eshu, this is a follow-up to Arrow's question, would you consider the Eshu to have a mercurial sensibility or correspondence, in your opinion? I know there's a vast category of them and they appear at different places and all of that, but in general, maybe you could say.
Oh, I think it's going to depend on the Eshu. Because, I mean, that's every Eshu, it's like you can have like a whole load of people have Eshu Mea Noche, but every Mea Noche is different. It's like a class of Eshus. Who share a lot of qualities. I think certainly some of the Eshus are very mercurial. I don't know if I'd be able to say that they all were. Definitely some Eshus I think are very mercurial, in the same way that some of the Pompaduras are very Venusian.
I have another question.
Go for it.
What has been some of your goals practicing magic? And maybe you've had multiple throughout the years.
Wow, that's a big one.
Sorry.
So I can go first, actually.
When I took my magical oath at 14, I vowed that I was going to dedicate my life to the pursuit of magic. And as time went by, I decided that I wanted to try and propagate as much as possible good practice to the best of my understanding and ability, and which then resulted in me running groups and writing books and things. And I was very influenced by the idea of magic as the great work, but it's the work of making yourself, for me, it's the work of making yourself and through yourself humanity great. I see it as being sort of next evolutionary step. The next step has to be a mental spiritual evolution for humanity. Physical is too slow. And so the proliferation of magic and encouraging people to practice magic is the necessary goal. It's like to evolve yourself, make yourself the best you can be, and also do everything you can to encourage those around you to emanate that, to make as many other people the best they can be as well. It's like the 100 Monkeys principle. Enough people need to rise to take everybody else with them. So for me, that's kind of the goal of magic, is to try and evolve the whole of humanity to a more positive state. And that's kind of been my ongoing thing, really. And I try to do my part to that by, as I say, putting out what I think is useful to the best of my ability at the time, and updating it as I go if I've found new and better ways, because the practice I do now is better than it was a year ago. We always have to be flexible, and if something's good, that's wonderful, but if you can make it even better, that's even more wonderful. We always have to be open to change and have that fluidity. And that's something I've noticed with magicians who've been practicing for decades, is you might think they'd get really set in their ways, but the ones I know actually become more fluid and flexible in their ways as they get older, because they understand this and they always want to do the things the best they can. So that's what in my books with Clavis Spiritum, there's actually some changes in there from Clavis Intelligentiarum, the previous book, because the work that I did afterwards and what I got from the spirits I was working with was like, well, that's really good, but you can do this and that to make it even better. So that the second book really builds on the first. It supersedes a couple of bits of it, but most of it is still totally the way I would do it. There's just a couple of changes, like I do a different magic circle now to the one I used to use, for example. So yeah, magic is some people it's not a popular attitude, but for me, magic is a service path. It's about trying to improve, the lot of humanity as a collective, which is why, for me, another really good indicator of people's magical practice and development is the level of compassion that you see in their lives, because for me, that is absolutely essential demonstrator that people are really understanding and living magic, because the more you do it, the more compassion you have for everything, for life in general, and also for spirits, including the dead. It's the understanding of the interconnectedness of everything that comes, and the desire for that to all be progressing.
You want to add something to that, Jen?
Oh, yeah, sorry, Nick. David, that's really interesting that you say that about the sort of the increase of awareness of the karmic connections that we have to place and spirit and also each other. Especially if you consider, like in contemporary Kabbalah, the Hasidic framework, like the preference to Hesed, like looking to infinite loving kindness. Obviously, in Buddhism in general, not just Tantra, but we do have this idea of bodhicitta framework. So it does seem like I'm not a perennialist, I'm an axialist, but I'm going to use perennial. It seems like a perennial idea that this, by sort of using magic alongside these kinds of more higher conscious ways of thinking or being in the world, you actually become more aware of the karmic implications of your own life, yourself, your magical practice, as well as your relationship to sort of like the spirits of the land and place. Sorry, I know that was more of a rant than a question, but I just, it's very profound that you say that, because it's something that like I think about as well. And so to hear someone else of your caliber say that, it just makes me feel edified in that, okay, we're all kind of seeing the same conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, you become more sensitive to just the whole subtle web of things around you. and how you can impact that, and even to the extent of like the words that you say. The grimoire is a very big example on not swearing, because it's like not profaning your breath, and that's it can be hard. Let's say somebody cuts you up in the car; it can be hard not to swear at them. But it's a good example of just even the little things. We need to be aware of the impact of the little things that we do. So yeah, I totally agree.
And on how subtle of a level can we interact and react in order to encourage the betterment, like minimum input, maximum output, holistically.
Yeah, I like that, minimum input, maximum output.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Still with intent.
Yes.
Mm.
David, if you don't mind, I mean, I know we've been going on for a while, but maybe if you don't mind we'll just spend a few minutes at least. Your last two books, what was the reasoning? Almost kind of like, I guess, what I was asking you earlier about the planetary and elemental magic. What is it about? Like, what made you put these books out? Like, what do you think you have to offer on that isn't out there now?
Okay, after I'd written the Grimoire Encyclopedia, Stephen Skinner and I were asked to do presentations for this Italian group, the Sulphur Society. I've done quite a few lectures and things for them now. Said we're going to be doing this weekend, and we want to do conjuration at it. We want to get everyone in groups to do conjuration, and can you guys help? So Stephen and I talked, and we said we think we should do the intelligences as a good starter. What day is it going to be on? It's going to be on a Sunday. Great, you can work with Solar Intelligence and Akil. Stephen said, okay, I'll do the theory, you do the practice. So fine. And he went before me, and then I was doing. So I started preparing stuff, and then I read a review that Jason Miller wrote about my book, Grimoire Encyclopedia, and he made a comment about my chapter on practice that I put in there, and said, this is a voice that we don't hear often enough, Rankine the Conjurer. And that got me thinking, I should write more practical stuff. And then I thought, I did this booklet a few years back on the conjurations and the planetary intelligences from an old sort of text. But I just gave the intelligences. And I've been saying to people for years and years, intelligences are a great place to start. And I thought to myself, but hang on, I'm putting this stuff together now to explain to people how to do it. And there's nowhere out there that tells you. It's just there's the conjuration without telling you what circle you should use, what tools, etc., etc. I need to write a book that's like a complete manual, because virtually none of the grimoires are complete manuals. They're like piecemeal. They're like bits that the person wanted to record. I need to record the spirit catalogue, or I want to record these magic circles or these conjurations. They're not complete. And there's lots of stuff missing. You can never assume that a grimoire, apart from something like Summa Sacra Magicae, which is 800 pages huge and it's his whole system woven together, is a complete practice. Like I see people saying, oh, the Arbitel is the easiest because you don't need tools. No, just because it doesn't say the tools are there, it doesn't mean you don't do it. It's taken as read that you would know to use those tools, to know to have a magic circle and a sword and a crystal. They're implied. That would be known to the person reading it. So I thought, well, if people are coming to it, it's not going to be known. So I need to put together everything that you would need to know. For someone who's coming, who's never worked a conjuration, I need to put everything in this book, in Clavis Intelligentiarum, that you need to know. So all about the timings, all the consecrations, what you need to have, how you consecrate it, when you consecrate it, what you need to do in the build-up time, how you deal with the purification, adding in the things that are modern as well, bringing it relevant. So in those days, obviously, there was no internet stuff. So now, as well as your fasting, having what I call electronic fast, that you don't go online, you don't do gaming, you don't do TikTok or YouTube or anything during that time, because you're keeping your mind focused on the conjuration, giving the whole actual sequence of the conjuration with description of what's going on, putting it all together in one manual for people, because there's nothing really like that I was aware of. So that was what inspired me to put Clavis Intelligentiarum. And then as soon as I'd finished and sent it off to Hadean, to the publishers, hooray. And then I get the tap, 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 because spirits don't keep office hours or planetary hours. They'll contact you whenever they want. That's, good job, but now you need to do more. This book you wrote, that's going to be a trilogy. It's going to be 3 of them. And I'm like, oh, okay, righto. You need to look at this and this. So then I got nudged about the winds and the Shekinah and started going down the rabbit holes of those and doing the practices. And so then that sort of turned into Clavis Spiritum, ways to enhance the practice. So it's like it builds on what's in Clavis Intelligentiarum by adding in the winds and the Shekinah, and adding in a few extra bits that didn't go in after. I could have put a consecrations of, for example, boots, and I've found out that it does talk in some grimoires about wearing underwear, because I've always just had a robe with nothing under it. But no, if you can actually have consecrated underwear and other stuff under there, particularly if you're outdoors in the cold. Nice to know. Anything, thermal long johns, consecrate them, you can wear them. So it's that thing of just trying to build on all the experience I have over the decades of 44 years of conjuration, and all the sort of little handy hints and things, or any mistakes that I've made, and trying to put all that information in for people so that they've got my template that has worked for me, which they can use as much or as little of as they want, with me explaining why everything is done, how it's done, etc. That was what inspired me to do the Clavis books, and there will be a 3rd one in a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, but I've got other books I have to write first. But it was to put out a nuts and bolts manual of everything that you need to know for doing conjuration. Focus in the first book entirely on the intelligences. The second one, I give the conjurations for the Olympic spirits and the demon bishops. I put the demon bishops in because they've not been worked with much. They're really interesting, and they're specifically attributed to the 4 elements, 1 demon to each bishop to each element. And so I wanted to bring more of that in as well, because of the lack of attention to the elements in the Grimoire tradition, which was something I feel needs to be a bit more brought in, because there's a huge amount of planetary stuff in the Grimoires, but you don't see that much elemental. And because the elemental stuff is the foundations that even the planets are built on, I wanted to bring a bit more of the elemental aspect into in that second one in Clavis Spiritum. So that's kind of what inspired me to do that. And adding in all sorts of really interesting stuff. The things that I've developed aren't written in the grimoires, but I found work really well, like the amount of visualization I brought in for the consecrations and stuff. And interestingly, I did find a reference in Summa Sacra Magicae, one of the bits hasn't been published yet, which kind of hints at that they might have been using visualization. So maybe I'm not saying this is definite, but it's possible that, again, I'm bringing back something that was a part of it that's just really not been written about. I don't know. But either way, if you've got effective tools that mesh well with what you've got, why not use them that enhance your practice? And so, for me, visualization is very much something that does add to that. So, I put it all in, explained it, where everything comes from, which grimoires, the bits I've merged into my template, or which bits I have created based on my experience. It's also full of lots of thanks to other people whose practices have inspired or encouraged me, or I've taken bits from. I always credit people, because that's one of the things I love in the grimoire tradition, is there's so much positivity, and people build on each other's work and acknowledge each other's work, rather than like the whole it's all about me thing. No, we're all benefiting. Somebody else does good work, we all benefit from it, and that's how it should be in magic. That we benefit from what other people do. We're not here to tear anyone down. We're not in competition with anybody. We're all just trying to, rise and evolve.
I like how you had mentioned, I guess, like the orbital before. How you were like saying, like, I guess people thought like, I don't need anything for this. When I was doing a lot of ritual work, I would typically work with like Egyptian deities, and I would normally attribute them to like either planetary magic when working with them, or the Kabbalistic, the spheres on the tree. And when I came across the Arbitel and I worked with it for a bit, I just assumed it was to be brought over to now instead of Hathor, I'm invoking Hagith or whatever. I think that might be the right one, whatever. Venus. I just thought it was kind of switching over, but I thought I still needed all that other stuff prior. I never looked at it as like, oh, I just, I guess we're going to sit here and do a mantra and that's it. Like, I just thought it was, it's kind of funny how you said that. I just never even looked at it being that basic.
But a lot of people, young people coming in now, the sort of generation don't, if it's not written, it's not there.
I guess, yeah. When you were mentioning stuff with the grimoire work before, and you were saying like maybe stuff left out, obviously maybe certain practices wouldn't be in there because they didn't exist prior. It's just a different type of school of thought. But like if someone was doing grimoire work and let's say part of their daily practice was doing certain breath work or maybe chakra work or a meditation, would you say that's an okay thing to like bring into the ritual to work in, or no, because it's not in there? Something as basic as that. I'm not saying like adding actually extra words or a totally different ritual, but like breath work, visualization, and breathe, meditation.
I would say absolutely. I actually say that if someone, particularly if there's more than one of you, if you've got somebody in the scryer role, or if you're doing it solo, a brief little meditation or visualization thing before engaging with the spirit is a very beneficial thing to have in there. And also, before you do the conjuration, if you energetic work, so you're just feeling in the most balanced you can be, absolutely. Why wouldn't you?
Nice. I like that. Anybody have any questions or comments or anything?
I'll do one last one. Okay. I'm sorry, guys. Thank you, Nick, and thank you, David. So I have so many, honestly, David, written, but I'll have to wait until the next time. But I think I want to talk about something you just brought up, like the prevalence of sola scriptura, sort of that framework of looking at things very shallowly as the text is the text and it means what it means. And also what you have called, I think, Anglo-centric in past interviews, like sort of appraisal of the wisdom text through that sort of more maybe Protestant or Anglican lens, and saying, okay, it begins and ends here, but now it's become more expansive. And in Buddhist studies, we call it Protestant presupposition, this idea that you can only read the wisdom texts as they are rather than acknowledge the inner outer secret or Dakini language or the various other sort of like commentaries and metaphysics that actually are deeply involved in it. Would you say that that is also how we should try and appraise or read Western wisdom sciences, through this more broad lens of looking at deeper and secret meanings? And I know this ties in with your ideas of blinds and how much certain authors put in or don't put in or may mislead you into certain conclusions or understandings.
Absolutely. I mean, if I hadn't been, looking at the phrasing and how you can mean it with the Shekinah stuff, it wouldn't have hit me. Oh my God, here we are. We're talking about, circle of fire around the throne, which is classic Shekinah imagery. Or here we're talking about, wisdom being feminine. Again, you have Shekinah. There's all these things. I'm going, that's Shekinah, that's Shekinah, that's Shekinah. First breath, that's Shekinah, first breath into Adam, blah, 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 blah. And it's just like the same. That epithets and titles and all these things have a reason, because they're like symbol layers. They open stuff up for us. And it's so important, you say, like, with these texts, to not just read it surface level. I mean, sure, you'll get something out of it surface level, but when you start looking beyond, then it's like, that's where you're going to find the gold. That's where you're going to, the wealth that's going to sort of give you those insights, those flashes and sparks of, that put, that then help you move on your way. So, yeah, I totally think that people do need to read them with that sort of level of perception. To meditating on books on the pages, I think is a great way to do it. It's like, to read like a paragraph in a book like that and then meditate on it and see what comes to you. Let your mind really play with it and process it. Not just zoom through a chapter and think you're going to gain, lots of insight. It's when I was actually meditating that it suddenly hit me. Hang on, it's like coming in my mind because I was doing classic sort of void emptying, and then seeing what came when it was empty, and then it was like that phrase popped in and that phrase dropped in. And I'm like, I'm seeing a pattern here. And then I went and picked the books off the shelf and looked, and I'm like, yeah. I'm seeing that pattern because I'm being prodded to see that pattern, or I'm inspiring myself, or whatever it might be. That we have to, so much of, back to that thing, only a 70th of the light spectrum is visible to us. So much of the spectrum is invisible, but we can be aware of it. We can feel it. We can sense it, and we have to apply that. I think when we're reading, we're only getting the top of the spectrum when we just read it in that normal way. We have to digest it and absorb and see what else we can get from it.
And I think also when you get into that, it's those with eyes to see and those with ears to hear. As you're going through this information through the course of your lifetime, you're learning more and more and gaining a deeper sense of what these realities are. And as you do that, your sense of reality becomes deeper and deeper and deeper, as you gain wisdom.
Which is one of the arguments for going back and rereading books that made an impact on you, because you get so much more from them next time round. Again, like, oh God, oh, I didn't realize that. Oh my God.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Did anybody else have any questions before we start to wrap it up? David, was there anything that you would like to say or anything about your stuff before we close it up here? Maybe you didn't get to.
I've just really been enjoying the conversation, seeing where it flowed. It's been great. I've already mentioned about the stuff I'm doing. I do an online conjuration course, which is 6 consecutive Sundays that I run twice a year. It's currently running at the moment. It's halfway through. So the next one will be in probably around April, May time. So if people are interested, that goes up on Hadean. It goes through Hadean, and I always advertise. That's a lot of fun. Each time has sort of grown a little bit from the sense of any new insights or things like the first run of it was about all the material from Clavis Intelligentiarum, and now it has all the material from Clavis Spiritum as well. One of the 2 books I'm currently working on is another practical grimoire book. So by the end of next year, that will probably get incorporated in as well. So yeah, I mean, I'm just really excited with the research and stuff I'm doing at the moment. I'm also doing a research grimoire book that's going to push a few things back and reveal some more bits that weren't known before. So that's some fun rabbit holes I'm going down as well.
Awesome. Do you want to let everybody know where they can find you online or get in contact with you?
Sure. I mean, my website is the very unoriginal davidrankine.com. So it's an easy way to contact me is a message through the website if people want to. I try and reply within a day or two to people when they message me. I do get a lot of people contact me through that. And from there, I'm happy to chat to people. It's been very fruitful for me. I love getting questions that make me think about stuff. One of the things that pushed me in one of the chapters I wrote in Clavis Spiritum was about 18 months ago. A guy messaged me and said, I'm in a wheelchair, I have mild cerebral palsy, I'm about to do my first goetic conjuration, I've got a couple of assistants. Are there any recommendations you'd make for how to amend the ritual for me? So I wrote him a long email of suggestions of ways he might moderate it and say, maybe the person could do this bit and you don't have to, but you should be doing as much of it as you can still. And that made me think, I need to put a chapter in the book about conjuring with physical or sensory impairment, and that needs to be highlighted because it's something that gets talked about a little bit, but not nearly enough. It's kind of becomes like an invisible thing. There's an unconscious bias because most of us don't have those issues ourselves. We don't think about it being inclusive to people who do. and so that email has resulted like in a whole exchange between us and me writing a bit for the book. And I contacted Craig Slee, who's done a lot of talks about working with physical disability, and asked him to read through it to make sure that I wasn't, being at all offensive or inappropriate in the way I was phrasing things. That I was getting things over in a good manner, and that's just one example. I had a lot of people write, and you get that thing. It's always a two-way thing. It's like with the classes, I always come away with like new ideas and insights from the things that people say. Anyone who's teaching should always be being taught by the people they're teaching as well. If you're doing it right, you learn from the process, and that's why I love, giving workshops and lectures and stuff, because I get so much from it. Because everyone has a unique perspective. You never know what they're going to bring to it and what they're going to tell you. That's another reason why there's so many credits in my books, is because somebody's asked me a question. I've gone, oh yeah, that needs to be addressed. Why people don't talk about that? It's like somebody asked me on one of the courses and said, so what do you do if you want to deconsecrate a pentacle? Oh, that needs to go in there. I've not seen anyone writing about that. So you've made a pact with a spirit, and then some years later you want to end the pact. It's fulfilled its purpose. How do you deal with that? Damn, that's another really important thing. Let's talk about that. Let's write about that. So, there's so many people. Often it can be the simplest questions by people who wouldn't have much experience. And they almost feel awkward about asking the question. But those questions are often the ones that hit the hardest, because they're the things that people don't address. It's the things that seem obvious that don't get talked about. And the things that are obvious and don't get talked about are often the most important things that need to be talked about, because they're the things where you'll trip up. And that's just that's been one of the big themes in those Clavers books as well, trying to address a lot, things like that, so that people don't trip up, because it's already addressed in the way I've written about it.
Thank you
It's
very
amazing.
much. Yeah. Yeah, I guess David, we already let everybody know where they can pretty much find you. Yeah, that's about it. Everybody else, I guess, real quick, if you don't mind, Eros, let everybody know where they can find you and stuff.
You can find me on YouTube at ArrowSup, and you can find me on Twitter at ArrowsToEthos. This was great. Thanks for coming on, David.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Eros. You asked some questions that I was going to ask, so thank you. I appreciate it. Less for me to do. Awesome. Jin, my man, what is going on, sir? Please.
Boss, Mr. 93. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Obviously, of course, David, thank you very, very much. Very much. I was honored and a little humbled to be on the panel with you. But I wanted to show you that I know a couple things, even though I'm not a ceremonial magician. So it was an amazing conversation, and I want to learn how to deconsecrate a pentacle. Not that I've ever done that, made a spirit pact, but I still would like to know how to do it, because I do know how to consecrate the greater keys. So. I'll just say this. Check out Brother Matt. Check out his stuff. Obviously, he's my co-host in the Grey Lodge, and I have an episode dropping on my show, Threshold Saints, with Gregory Peters, who just wrote the book New Aeon Tantra, with our other co-host on the Grey Lodge, Solar Exile, who I believe was in the chat a little earlier. And so look forward to that. And of course, Love is Cause of Knowledge, Aeon of the Daughter. Let's fucking go. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Thank you. I'm really glad you could make it, for sure. And Headless Giant, you're muted.
How you doing, everybody? So you can find me doing a show called Alchemy Mondays with Arrows on Monday, and you can find me also doing 777 with Nick on Tuesdays. Forgot that one the first time. So we're going to be going through the Kabbalah of Aleister Crowley. And also on Thursdays, I've got your emails. So send them to headlessgiantpodcast@gmail.com, and I'll read your esoteric/occult experiences on the air. Which, David, if you want to send me some mail, that would be amazing. Love to read that. Exactly. So also, I've got the trialogues with Ethan Indigo and Ricardo tomorrow. So check those out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for making it. And Matt, sir, let everybody know where they can find all your amazing stuff.
Yes. Thanks a lot, everyone. David, especially, obviously, very nice to have met you personally. And I mean, if you happen to go at the, I don't know if they're gonna do another one next year, the Soper Society. They're gonna do another convention, but it would be really nice. And yeah, had a lot of fun. You guys can find me again on all social medias with the handle at Mattmora19. Also, my website, Kabbalah.com. That's KAABALAH.com. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir, for coming on. And last but not least, Robbie Mark.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Nick. And I want to say, David, it was a pleasure speaking to you today. Great conversation, and it's always great to see the old faces and some new faces. And if anybody wants to check out my stuff, from my artwork that I do to my MetaMindcast and everything in between, you can go to my Linktree, which is Linktree RMARX, and that'll pull up everything. And yeah, this was a great time. Thanks.
Thank you, Robbie, for making it. And again, David, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. Again, it was like really like surreal for me to actually be able to have a conversation for you. Again, not to fanboy you too much, but it's just wild knowing that like there was stuff of yours that I incorporated into my ritual work and that helped me grow ritually. Like this guy's in front of me now and I get to talk to him. So it was really amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody else who came on the show and everybody in the chat. I really appreciate it. And that's where we go live. I appreciate everybody's questions, whatever they got to add. And that is the end of another Occult Rejects. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.
Thank you.